Hello, and welcome to the Deciduous Bonsai podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Robson, a bonsai professional here in Portland, Oregon, where we at RAKUYO Bonsai specialize in deciduous trees, and I'm joined by my student, friend, and moderator on the bonsai subreddit, Maciek.
Hello.
So, Maciek, today we are going to talk about 7 things that people add to their bonsai that I think are either totally useless or probably to some degree of not very helpful, somewhere in that spectrum.
Debatable.
But, yeah. But we're going to talk about 7 things that people add to their trees nutritionally that just don't really make a lot of sense.
So like fertilizers and things like that?
Fertilizers, products, things that you kind of water in that the goal is they help our trees, but they're really probably just snake oil.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious one is fertilizers themselves, but some fertilizers are better than others. Some are ideal for what we're doing, and some are ideal for something completely different, like changing the color of hydrangeas and things like that.
So for bonsai, we want to use high nitrogen fertilizers. That's really, really important for bonsai quality growth. And there's a myth of a 0-10-10, a low nitrogen fertilizer. A lot of people talk about this, especially in regards to fall. But really, our trees need nitrogen for every single cellular process that they go through by tenfold. And nitrogen is actually the most ephemeral of all the nutrients. So it's disappearing the fastest from our soils. It's the most important more than any other thing.
Like a short half-life or something?
It has a short half-life, yeah. And it gets absorbed the most quickly. So it's really, really important nutrient for plant growth. You definitely don't want to skip using it with our trees.
So these fertilizers that they have a 0 somewhere in the NPK value on the package, we don't want those.
Yeah, it's not that it's going to harm your tree by using those, but you're spending money on something that isn't going to give you the result that just changing it to a well-balanced fertilizer might.
Actually, let me check myself. What if the nitrogen is at, say, 1.0 or something, but then the other values are 0? What does that tell me about a fertilizer? Is that useful for us?
Well, we always want nitrogen to be higher. And so like if you look at fish emulsion, for example, it's usually like 5-1-1 or 6-1-1, that 5 or 6 being the nitrogen.
So that's not bad.
That's a kind of good proportion. It doesn't have to be 5-6 times higher than the rest, but we do want our nitrogen to be the most substantial kind of component.
What if the other components are zeroed out? Do we have any thoughts on that? Or do we want to kind of avoid those?
We probably want to avoid those too. A lot of the products that I really like, I'm using a diluted Miracle Grow in the garden, but if I had a small collection, had a more hobbyist-sized collection, I'd probably be using a product called Grow Big by a company called Fox Farm. That's 644. Has all the macronutrients in really good proportions, but a lot of micronutrients in there as well. And even Miracle Grow has a lot of micronutrients, things like manganese and zinc and all these things that trees need just on very kind of small levels. So basically any fertilizer that you're buying that's just not a well-rounded, well-balanced one is probably not going to get you the maximum growth that you could be getting.
I've heard regarding the nitrogen thing and sort of the motivations of avoiding nitrogen in the fertilizer is that somehow we're attempting to prevent bud break like later in the year. And I thought bud break is actually a stress response due to cutting or due to some loss. So
typically, growth is very much stimulated by pruning. Also, for trees growing in the winter, the 2 things that they're reading are day length and temperature. And so the amount of nutrients is just not even a component around on their radar. So it might be something that if you are trying to grow a tree that's very seasonal in a place that doesn't have seasons, you might consider shutting off your fertilizing so that you're not having a lot of nutrients in the soil. But for a tree that's growing in a climate that it wants to be growing in, it's really just not an issue.
So for like a subtropical zone, we might want to ease off at some points on fertilizer.
Yeah. If versus like a full tropical, like my ficus, I fertilize all winter long because they come inside in the winter and they're still growing. They don't have a dormant
They
season.
kind of want it to be July all year long.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the best ways at home you can improve if you have a lot of ficus bonsai is fertilize them inside in the wintertime. And I do it as much as every time that I water them. I'll add in a little fertilizer. And that really, really makes a big difference with indoor tropicals.
Are there any other wacky or strange NPK value things that we should be watching out for that are not what we want?
Yeah, one of our items down the list we'll talk about, but usually just when you're shopping for fertilizer, avoid ones that are 0, 10, 10. Really hone in on just a nice, well-balanced fertilizer. It has a good proportion of our macronutrients. Those are the 3 numbers that you'll see printed on the bottle. Nitrogen being the first of those 3 numbers. That's the one that we really want to focus on, is having higher nitrogen than other components, and then having a nice mix of micronutrients mixed in as well. So having, that's the benefit of a Miracle Grow or a Grow Big, is they have all the micronutrients kind of added in. If you're using something like fish emulsion, which is a great product, that doesn't tend to have a lot of the micronutrients. So supplementing with a Miracle Grow or a Grow Big can be nice, or even mixing them together as making a little fertilizer cocktail. It can be nice, so you can cover multiple bases. But kind of just in general with fertilizing, go for well-rounded products. Don't stay away from the hyper-specialized ones, because those tend to not work for overall growth.
It's my understanding that trees use extremely tiny, in terms of their actual quantity of mass, like if you were to measure it, very small amounts of actual micronutrients. So we're not looking to like throw like a crap ton of actual micronutrient mass at this, right? So just because fish fertilizer doesn't have a ton of micronutrients doesn't mean we need to like supplement with a huge amount of...
Yeah, you don't need to dump a bunch of like pure zinc or copper on your trees, right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, like people going to like, chemistry lab suppliers or something and trying to concoct these things.
Yeah, even CalMag, calcium, magnesium, with a well-rounded fertilizer, I don't find the need for those products.
Right.
So, because your magnesium or manganese is going to be in your Miracle Grow, your Grow Big. It's in a well-rounded fertilizer.
In a farm, like an agricultural environment where I have seen CalMag applied, it is still applied in very small amounts per plant.
Yeah.
So it's not a huge dosage in terms of mass.
And that's another thing that can get kind of lost in translation, is just because something applies to some of these other horticultural aspects, like farming or rose gardening or growing cannabis or whatever, oftentimes those things do not translate to bonsai.
Right.
So,
do we have any theory around that? Or it's just
we have very different objectives. We're working with different types of plants. We're not working with herbaceous plants. We're working with woody plants. We're growing in completely different soil mediums. We're doing different trimming techniques. It's just, I wish a lot of those things would apply, but they honestly just don't.
Yeah. I'm asking about theory because sometimes I feel like there is a thirst for sort of academic rigor around everything we talk about in bonsai out there, but there isn't actually anyone studying these things.
There's nobody studying these things. And you're basically, the benefit of talking to a bonsai professional like me or Ryan Neal or Michael Hagedorn is that anecdotal evidence is kind of all we have. And in talking to someone like me or Michael or Ryan who see thousands of trees a year, we're going to have a much stronger sense of what's actually going on, what's working, than someone who's just dealing with 30 plants in their own backyard.
Yeah, the population of professional growers is like a real behind, in its wake, it leaves like a sort of like trail of truth.
Yeah.
Right. You look at a garden like this, and you just see so much ramification and everything else. So, if the strategy of not using those various additives and various like extreme strategies or giving into product messaging, if the strategy of not using those things was a problem, then surely we wouldn't see ramification like the one we'd see in this garden or in Ryan's garden or Michael's garden or Peter T's garden, et cetera.
Yeah.
And pretty much all those people use sort of bog standard like well understood fertilizer, well understood NPK ratios.
Yeah,
We don't really mess
and I
around too
have so
much.
many trees here that I can't afford, like literally can't financially afford to use products unless they are going to work and make a difference.
Right.
And so most of these products on our list, some of these I've used in the past before, but
Just to see.
just to see, or sometimes I use them to make me feel good when they don't actually do much for the tree. So let's move on to number 2 on our list.
Yeah, vitamins.
Vitamins. There's a lot of different vitamin supplements. We won't name names, but there's lots of different products out there that just these vitamin kind of hormone kind of things that you can water into your tree. They're usually a liquid product that you just add. You soak
Yeah.
your tree and you
Not
water
just
in.
for not just for fertilization either. Some of them are for like reviving a tree. I mean,
Yeah.
fertilizer could sometimes revive a tree a bit, right? If it's actually missing fertilizer, but otherwise
Fertilizer is
horticulture
actually a great tool. If you have a weak tree,
Right.
I fertilize more typically. But yeah, these vitamin products, oftentimes they don't even tell you what's in them, which is always a massive red flag with anything that we're adding to our bonsai. Is if it's just some miracle cure on there, this thing is going to help it thrive like crazy.
Yeah.
But they don't actually tell you what's inside. Big red flag. Don't use it. Don't buy it.
And also, if it seems to cure absolutely everything under the sun, like from like leaf diseases to this to that, I don't really think of fertilizer or any kind of supplement like a vitamin as curing a leaf disease per se.
No, the more claims they make, the more red flags tend to go up for me. But yeah, these products, again, if we're creating a really good system for our bonsai to grow, meaning we have good soil components, our tree is growing in a good climate, and we are giving good nutrition, like what we talked about with a well-balanced fertilizer on the last bullet. If we're doing all of those things, then the tree doesn't need vitamin B1 or any of these other products to get good growth.
Yeah.
And so it's just it's a way to appeal to the consumerism that's in all of us, to where, hey, buy this and it'll make it better. It's not always the case.
Yeah. I actually can't think of anything other than B1 that's been kind of bandied about as a vitamin style additive. Have you heard of any others?
People are trying things all the time, and actually the next one on our list is kind of goes along with it. But yeah, people try a lot of different things, and all these fertilizer companies are just looking for the next product to rope you in and get you to buy something. So I see things pop up and go away a lot. Silica comes up as a supplemental thing. That's something that I've played and experimented with. There's a product called Protect, which the theory is the silica strengthens the cell walls and creates more resistance to heat and cold stress. That's a product that I've used a lot in the past, and I just never see a substantial result. And so for me, with my trees, and for all of my clients and students' trees, I'm not just maintaining the 300 trees here, but probably about 1,000 trees between all of the people I regularly maintain.
Yeah.
I need to see a product that's actually going to make a difference. I see that with a well-rounded fertilizer, but I don't see it with a 0-10-10 fertilizer. I don't see it with any of these vitamin products that help your trees thrive more than they normally would.
I think the vitamin ones are kind of at the lowest rung of this ladder, because you don't even hear agricultural users use them. Some of the other stuff that we'll mention is used at the agricultural scale, where they can see some difference with the crops, and maybe a 5% yield difference might actually be the difference between profit and loss, right?
Yeah.
So maybe some of those things make sense, but the vitamins, I don't really see anybody. I've never seen any academic papers so far written in favor
and we
of
won't
those.
in regards to bonsai, but yeah,
And
for these other products, but yeah, they're just, if we're going to spend money on something, like, let's actually get a benefit of it, right? Let's see and feel a difference.
I guess with vitamins, the tragedy would also be like doing that, but then thinking that your job's done, gonna wash my hands and walk away from this tree, everything will be fine, but then ignoring maybe the bigger horticultural practice issues that are at play maybe overwatering, maybe overexposing.
Those things
any
are
other thing,
100 times more important than
Right.
the vitamin supplement that you could water in. I think a lot of the times there's like a psychological component. We buy these products for our trees because it makes us feel better that I'm buying this vitamin thing that this tree needs, or it's like I'm buying this health smoothie
Yeah.
treat for my dog to like it makes us feel better than it actually helps. And I think there's a big component to that with a lot of these
I was
products.
thinking it'd be funny if, one of these products said, just take a swig yourself too, maybe
Yeah,
you'll feel
yeah.
good too.
Yeah.
Who knows, right? It's just,
Yeah, don't do that at home.
don't actually do that. Yeah, I'm pretty
But
sure
yeah.
it's a bad idea.
But yeah, that's kind of what they're selling is more. A lot of these companies are selling like a feel good thing, like your trees are your babies, so use this. It'll help you feel good. Give the trees the nutrients that they're missing, right? So, and the next one I have personal experience of that. So number 3 on our list is seaweed and kelp. When I was a bonsai hobbyist, I religiously used seaweed and kelp. I've
seen it used also, or I've seen some collectors of trees, like trees in the Rockies and things like that, conifers and stuff, where they'll fill a tub with kelp
Yeah.
or seaweed extract and then soak the freshly collected tree in that for a day and claim that it makes a big difference. I would sort of say, how could you even know if that makes a difference? You're working on
Maybe
such
just
a small
soaking
scale.
it in any liquid for a day is making a difference. Like,
Right,
I'd be
right.
curious to see if just water would make a difference.
Yeah, that'd be funny.
But yeah, it's so I used it a lot. I would mix it with fish emulsion and water it in with the trees. And again, like when I was a hobbyist, I think it more made me feel good than I actually saw a tangible difference. I've done trials both in my garden here at Michael Hagedorn's garden when I was studying there, where literally half the garden is on seaweed, half the garden's not. You do a whole year of that or 2 years of that, and literally there's like zero like tangible differences between.
I seem to recall you guys doing a couple different experiments like that. I think there was one with maybe Miracle Grow or maybe maybe the fish fertilizer as well, and you guys really liked that. I can't remember now.
Yeah. I think a nice, well-rounded organic like Miracle Grow, if diluted to the right levels, and fish emulsion, those show really, really, really strong results, tangible differences, which is why I use those products here. But the seaweed, don't
Even
see
in
anything.
a year, you didn't see it.
Nothing.
So actually, why don't we throw a quick question in here? If somebody has a fast-growing tree, like a tree that a species that should grow fast, they have otherwise good conditions, they've checked the checklists, and now they're about to apply a new fertilizer. They've been doing it wrong so far. They've watched this podcast, maybe think, oh man, I've been doing it wrong. I've been doing too little fertilizer or something. Is there a time? Is there an amount of time, like a time window, in which they might actually start to see results, and what might they see? How might they verify that? Oh, yeah, it's having an effect.
Yeah, that's a really good point. With plants, they live on a very different time scale than us people. So you really, like a season might make a difference. Now,
in deciduous, though, we could probably get pretty fast feedback sometimes, right?
in deciduous, we can, within a season, if you're not fertilizing maybe correctly, and then you really watch this podcast and start and make some radical changes pretty fast, I would say within 2-3 weeks you'd probably start seeing some initial results, and then after 3 to 4 months you're really going to see it. And literally, when I advise clients and students on fertilizing, and we shift to a method that's more similar to what I'm doing, I've never heard of someone going back to what they were doing before. Right. Everyone sees the results and feels it and buys into it based on what they see on their plants.
So is that leaf color on existing leaves, or is it leaf color on new leaves, or is it maybe shoots coming out faster, or better shoots, more thick, plump foliage? Like
it's
what kind
all
of
that.
details?
It's
all
a
those things?
lot of small things kind of added up.
If it's like a really wrong strategy, and suddenly it's a very, very conventional good strategy, then the difference should be pretty obvious, I guess.
Yeah. And with products like seaweed, we just tend not to see those things happening. It's something that we water into the pot. You spend a lot of money on seaweed. Seaweed's not cheap. And it's one of those things, like if I was going to spend, to use seaweed in this garden would take, $100 to $300 worth of seaweed a year. to use. You know,
You could spend that on pottery. You could spend it on any number
exactly.
of things. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't. If I'm going to spend several $100s on products for this garden, I gotta like see a difference, and with that we just don't. And when you look at the research on that, there's a really great resource. It's through Washington State University, I believe. Dr. Linda Chalker Scott.
Oh yeah.
She has a horticultural
blog.
myths website.
Yeah.
She talks about compost tea and how terrible that is. She talks about, but basically, so she's a PhD. Horticultural scientist, and she basically takes all these topics. You can click on, you know, I think she has like 80 or 90 different topics. You click on one like the myth of seaweed fertilizer. You click on it, she shows you every scientific study that's been done on that, summarizes them in a nice kind of almost ChatGPT-like kind of way.
Maybe we could put a link in the show notes. After
Yeah, we
this.
can put a link in the description about that. But yeah, she has a great one about seaweed, about mycorrhiza even, and even some of these vitamin ones. So she picks through several of these topics. But she basically said, you know, there was a really early study that maybe showed some benefits about seaweed early on, but every study in the last 20, 30 years has shown no difference in crop yield or anything. Sometimes with propagation of cuttings, they'll see a little tiny bit of a difference, but otherwise, you know, it's one that I'm not saying it does absolutely nothing, but I'm saying for spending, you know, $20, $30 a bottle of it, you're not going to see a difference.
Yeah, we keep coming back to costs, and I can't help but notice that the growers, many of the growers that we respect so much for their results in Japan, are quite frugal, and they don't use this stuff. And they get good results. And usually if they don't do something, it's not just because it doesn't have good results, but also because they tend to be cost conscious in Japan.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, usually a bonsai professional is a good person to listen to in these regards because we have a lot more trees than the average
Just like
hobbyist.
scale.
And so like I'm saying, if I'm going to spend several $100s on something, I want to like actually see a difference. And it's a little bit of a different feeling than when I had 20 trees and that $20 bottle for the year or whatever.
No big deal.
No big deal, right? But on this scale, and on the scale of not just the 300 trees that we have here, but you know, the 1,000 trees that I maintain in a given year, there's no results that I can see on seaweed and in any of these products. Now, it is not going to hurt your tree to use seaweed according to the package directions, but why spend $20 on it if it's not going to make a difference, right?
Yeah, especially when you could be putting that effort somewhere else.
Yeah, and it's more. I think it's less about the cost, and it's more about just the misleading claims on a lot of these bottles, and maybe in just our thought process.
The mindset,
what
venturing
we think
forth,
it's doing.
Venturing forth confidently wrong.
Yeah.
That this is doing a great thing, and kind of building everything on top of that afterwards. Yeah, I worry about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Shall we talk about mushrooms?
Let's talk about mushrooms. Number 4 on our list is mycorrhiza. So when I was at Yale, I went to the Yale School of Music, previous life, but I would audit classes in the School of Forestry. And which was an amazing thing Yale let us do. We could audit any class. You know, you could go to Yale Law School, Yale Med School, and we could just audit any class.
What does it mean to audit a class?
You basically sign up for the class, attend it without getting tested on it, basically. You just get to go listen to all the lectures and just basically be a ghost in the room. Right?
I did that unofficially. Where I went
you
to
just
school.
snuck in?
Yeah, I just snuck in. I went to some linguistics classes and things like that. It was really fun.
Well, I went to some classes in the School of Forestry, and I was interested about mycorrhiza at the time. And so I asked, and we were talking about it in one of the classes, so I raised my hand and I asked the professor, I was like, what do you think about the mycorrhiza products? He's like, well, there's a difference between endomycorrhiza and ectomycorrhiza. One goes into the root, one grows on the outside of the root. He said with the ectomycorrhiza, there's 7,500 different types of ectomycorrhiza. What are the chances that bag is going to have the one out of the 7,500 types that your tree actually needs and will work with your tree?
Yeah, and they usually list it. They list like 7 or 8. Edna's Best or whatever. They always have that little list there.
So it's one that, like, again, these mycorrhiza additives, like, are they going to hurt your bonsai by doing them? No, but they're probably
They might, right? I mean, we've seen some absolute Rice Krispie cakes form that are almost like undrainable.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
You're talking
Michael
mycorrhiza in and of itself, like
Yeah.
in the bonsai pot?
Right. Like
Yeah,
it just really gets thick. I think Michael's talked about it before, right? Where it gets too thick, you have to hit it with Daconil to knock it out again to get drainage in the pot. He's had to
Yeah.
do something like that before.
Yeah.
So it could hurt.
Yeah, but I mean, in general, I think it is a tax. You know, this fungus is a beneficial relationship. It's taking sugars from the tree in exchange for access to water. The benefit of it is on a dry day, if your tree gets a little dry, that mycorrhiza will expand the water capacity of where the root zone is by like 100 times,
It's like a big
1,000
sponge.
times. Yeah.
It's like a network of sponginess.
Yeah. So even if you don't have roots in that zone, the mycorrhiza's there and it's able to pull up moisture. So we could have a debate, or maybe people smarter on this topic than us could have a debate on whether it's actually a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
You can grow 100% healthy bonsai with zero mycorrhiza in your pot. A complete sterile pot can grow very, very healthy bonsai.
Well, speaking of sterile pots and sterile soils, we often do start with sterile soils. I mean, think about the number of times you and I have bare-rooted something literally with a high-pressure spray hose and then put it into akadama that's on the package says, in order to be imported into the United States, we baked this at 300 Celsius for like 12 hours or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And from some of the people that are quote unquote smarter than us, I have seen it claimed that the microbiome is inevitable. You do not have to do anything to make it happen, except for make a nice, welcoming environment for the roots, right?
Yeah.
So oxygen-rich, good, porous, everything, all the nice things we like about our soils.
We do
right?
bonsai well, and nature happens.
If the tree gets healthy enough in that initial starter environment to start secreting those secretions that the fungi and the bacteria are attracted to, then that stuff happens on its own. And from what I have seen, what occurs on its own is probably more endemic to what that tree is carrying with it
than any product that you can buy that's claiming to have the magic fix.
The list of spores that's in the Edna's Best package or whatever you're buying at the store, that might all be pine related spores from like some random forest in Georgia or some forest wherever in Europe or wherever you're buying this stuff. So I don't know. I'm very much swayed by there's a mismatch here argument that you were saying before.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think.
This too is also covered by if we needed to do this, then you'd be doing it, Michael would be doing it, Peter T would be doing it, Bjorn would be doing it, all these professionals would be doing it. They're not doing it, and yet they have the most superlative, fantastic trees on the planet.
Yeah.
And often, even if they don't add those things, they still do find evidence of a healthy fungal system.
I have mycorrhiza and good microbiome in all the pots here, and I add none of it. So things find their way in. If you give the tree the right conditions, I fully believe it will set itself up in a good system. Now, all that being said, I don't believe in the importance of there being an absent kind of microbiome on the trees.
Right. We're not saying zero. You wouldn't want to hit it with antifungal broad spectrum.
I'm just saying the thing
day.
that you're buying at the local hardware store is probably not the solution. Right?
Yeah, if you just happen to have a university in your town where there's the world's best beech specialist that happens to be growing exactly the same beech that you, and they just did a whole bevy of PhD level studies on this exact species of this exact spore is perfect for beech, and they were like, here's a packet. Well, you're welcome to take that packet, probably.
Maybe take the packet. But I'm also more skeptical of their science. If the company is the source of the scientific information.
Right. If they're funding it,
Yeah, I'm very skeptical of it.
Yeah. I mean, keep it simple is working for the professionals, so why not keep it simple from the product acquisition point of view?
Yeah.
You know?
Keep it simple.
Truth comes out in the big garden here.
Yeah.
So what's next on our list?
Yeah, after mycorrhiza, it's just basically kind of a broad spectrum, crazy additive products from what we see a lot here from the cannabis industry.
Yeah.
You can go, and I don't think it's just here. I see it in Denver. It's starting to pop up all over the country. Is all of these indoor gardening stores, right?
Right. Grow tent. People who have high CO2 tents.
Yeah, yeah. An indoor gardening store is basically just slang for people who want to grow marijuana, right?
Yep. Yep. Or tomatoes or something in a grow tent. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's all of these, and when you go into one of those stores, you're gonna see like 500 bottles of different random stuff.
Fulvic acid or whatever. All
Yeah,
this
yeah.
stuff.
Humic acid. You'll see, CalMag. You'll see, all these crazy products. And I do think that those products probably have a place in that industry. I'm not in that industry. I have no idea what it takes to grow any of that stuff.
And we also mentioned earlier that at the agricultural scale, maybe there is something to it when you're working at the margins of 5% versus 10%.
Yeah, I'm sure someone who's growing any of that stuff, like if they're trying to get more whatever, like they're doing the same things that we're doing. Like if you're growing at scale, like you're going to use a product that you actually see tangible results from. But I know growing high quality bonsai at scale that when I buy a lot of those humic acids or CalMags or any of that specialty silica stuff that I see at those places and I use it on the trees, I haven't seen any anecdotal evidence in the 1,000 trees a year that I'm exposed to.
When we talk about CalMag, by the way, we're talking about stuff that has a serious chemistry effect on how things are taken up into the roots, how things cross the osmotic barrier. All of those things are very much affected by this and interact with your water supply, the bits and pieces of stuff that are in your water, the type of soil you use. So if you were to dare to try to use something like CalMag, you really have to be careful because you might misstep.
Yeah.
And when an agricultural operation, like a big farm growing corn or something, uses something like that, they don't misstep because they first get lab tests and things like that. That's kind of, again, we're going back to cost, very difficult to make work. Even for a hobbyist who only has 5 trees, I mean, if you're paying like $200 per tree to analyze the leaf mass, some of the soil and your water, just to find out you actually don't need CalMag, you just need to use more fertilizer or something.
Yeah, yeah. Just using more fertilizer of a well-rounded product that has all the beneficial things in there. I mean, I think one of the ways to think about bonsai is we just need to give the tree the right tools it's need, and the tree will take care of itself, right? We need to provide well-balanced nutrition. We need to provide good soil, good light, good water, good air. If we just set it up in a really good system, things happen naturally. It's not me buying a special product to make that system happen. It's allowing the tree to naturally do what it wants to do.
Now, in this category of products, the cannabis and agricultural stuff, there is some futzing with water pH. Is there anything there that could be legitimate if our pH is known to be not good for whatever tree we're growing?
Yeah, typically they'll say, the optimal nutrient absorption is when our water pH is about 6.5, 6 to 6.5.
So is it legitimate to maybe use something to nudge the pH back to, is that an okay?
It can be. So my pH coming out of the hose is around 8.
Right.
But I don't treat my water at all. And again, I don't think anyone in town has better results than I do. From what I've seen. They say the main difference for wanting to treat water is if you have a high TDS component, a lot of total dissolved solids or salts in your water.
So calcium bicarbonate or whatever it is.
Yeah, like if you get a TDS meter, you measure water and it's like 200 or 300 coming out of the tap, then it's very beneficial to bring your acid down. But the more pure the water is, the less that's important. And our TDS out of the tap is like 20. So I don't do any acid or you just I don't acidify the water here at all.
So pH is not the whole story.
pH is not the whole story. Yeah, it's more what is the quality of that water. And then
like
if
the
the quality is
soup.
bad, then you might want to bring down the pH.
Right.
That's the way a chemist has explained it to me. But And I have seen evidence of people who have really bad quality water where they change the pH and it makes a difference. But if your water quality is good, I don't believe you need to change it.
Yeah, I've heard from people in like Southern California and places like that where it's groundwater. It's not like mountain source water like we have, but certain areas have groundwater. They do have significant problems with that. But
Southern California has terrible water.
Yeah, but they don't necessarily seem to solve it with pH additives. They don't really add anything at all. They use like reverse osmosis.
Yeah, reverse osmosis. If you have bad water, that's the best way to handle it.
Clean the water,
Just
right?
clean water.
Yeah.
If you're doing that, use reverse osmosis, not reverse osmosis deionization, which will strip it about 100% versus regular reverse osmosis strips it about 95%. It's even more important to have a well-balanced fertilizer when you're doing that, something like a Miracle Grow or a Grow Big or a Dyna-Grow.
Are we losing the micronutrients? I guess
Because you're stripping a lot of the good things from the water as well. So
groundwater, I guess, makes sense.
So my clients who use reverse osmosis will when they make their RO water, they will add Grow Big or Miracle Grow to that mix so that it, and on a very small micro amount, just so that water now has the nutrients that the plants
It's like a tiny little baseline, like a microdosing strategy.
Exactly.
Okay. I think we're done with ag industry and cool stuff. Number 6.
Number 6 is one that you've heard a lot more about than I do. So tell me about pine bark and what you've been hearing of.
So pine bark, not as a soil additive. Like if you're using pine bark as a moisture strategy, moisture retention strategy, that's a separate discussion we could have, and maybe we'll save that for a soil episode. But if the reason that you're adding pine bark or some other organic nutrient like mulch or something to your pot is because you think of it as fertilizer, then you need to know that trees do not eat dirt.
Trees do not eat dirt.
Trees do not
You
eat
actually
dirt.
told me a fun story about
So there's this famous experiment. There's Jean-Baptiste von Helmont in the early 1600s. He plants a willow in a big container with a very, very specific measured amount of soil. Like he weighed the mass of the soil. He knew exactly how much that soil weighs when it's dry. He grew the tree to something like, I don't know, like 160 pounds. He grew a fairly big willow in this container for I think like 5 years or something of that nature. Then he takes the tree out, he weighs the soil, and the soil has basically not changed mass at all, right? So that was the first experiment that kind of lit everybody's mind up like, holy crap, trees are not eating dirt. Trees are eating something else. They're building their mass up with something else. And I think von Helmont thought it was water. Now we know that trees are actually made out of water, air, or specifically the carbon in the air, and sunlight, and that's pretty much it. And then the actual micronutrients that we were talking about earlier are in tiny, 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 tiny quantities, right? Like molybdenum or something to stitch together DNA fragments or whatever. So with that in mind, when you think of good soil, good loamy soil as a bunch of decaying pieces of other plants, you know, that's a kind of a broken mentality, right? And loam, in fact, the word loam, I think a lot of people associate it with this idea of humus, right? This sort of like organic thing, but loam is actually 100% inorganic, right? It's all just mineral. That's the actual truth of what loam actually is, right? So trees don't eat rotting pine bark. Mushrooms eat rotting pine bark, and then mushrooms emit gases and cause problems and things like that. So pine bark is not a fertilizer. Mulch is not a fertilizer. These things can hold fertilizers, but then so can akadama and pumice, right?
Yeah, and if we're using an inorganic soil like akadama and pumice, like we're adding the nutrition that it needs with our well-rounded fertilizers that we use regularly. So we don't need to have any nutrition at all in the soil.
Right. It's kind of hydroponic almost in nature.
Very hydroponic, which is why bonsai does really not translate to a lot of these other horticultural fields. Where that's soil and amending the soil is such an important part of those worlds. We just don't have that.
What's kind of nice about that too is, it's counterintuitive that it's nice to not have your preferred soil hold on to a lot of fertilizer for a long time. But what is nice about it is that if you have a rainy winter, you can wash a lot of the excess out,
Yeah.
and then start with a known level of fertilizer in the soil at the beginning of the next season without thinking, oh man, it's been absorbed into everything.
Yeah, you need you do not need any organic components in your soil if you are making up for it with fertilizer. And that's something that I saw. We talked in the last episode about my Japan trip. I went to Japan. We went to 29 gardens in 10 days. I looked at the soil in every single one of those gardens. I made a conscious effort to look at the soil in every single one of those gardens, and I saw in 28 of the 29 gardens that we visited, they all used the exact, or not, maybe not exact, but incredibly similar soil mix. It was all about 70, 80% akadama, 20, 30% pumice. I saw that at Komura's with conifers. I saw that at Shinji Suzuki's, with just like everything. It was across the board. It's not, one third, or a lot of the mixes that we see here. It was like 80% akadama on average, 20% pumice on average, all across the board on every high-level bonsai in Japan that I saw. And there wasn't pine bark in any tree. There wasn't, any organic component in any of these trees. They make up for it. We make up for it in our bonsai practice with fertilizer, but the inherent soil itself does not need any of those things.
Yeah, the soil is not a nutrient. It's like a stage for the roots to play in.
That's right.
Right, and the porosity and the drainage and things like that. The longevity of the soil matters, but it is not there to feed the tree.
Yeah, in the context of bonsai, right? Like, we don't need
bonsai.
that.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, you could argue, in the natural environment of the ground, the mushrooms are consuming the organic substances, then they're breaking them down, then they're releasing different things. But we can do that much better.
And much more calculated with our added fertilizer.
And then we're not building up this debt of organic decayed matter that has
right, because we never
down.
really have to change out the soil of our trees because the soil gets bad. We have to change it out because the roots fill up the pot, right? And so we trim the roots back, we add fresh soil. But using that soil components, we can keep that core mass of fine roots, and we don't have to replace it. That's the magical part of using high akadama, and why every top garden for every top tree in Japan uses it, is it's sustainable. And as it breaks down, that's why they use the 20-30% pumice in there, so that you still get space for water and air to get in to that broken down akadama.
Yeah, and if I'm breaking down a bit of pine bark versus I break down a bit of akadama, I'd rather be breaking down the akadama because it can still move water and air.
And still grows really great roots, versus once that pine bark breaks down, that has a lifespan. And
roots are going to work around it or not even through it or die near it.
It becomes anaerobic and it just, you don't get good root growth in really rotted, broken down soil.
Right. So
you get great root growth in the beginning, but the longer it's in there, the less you get. So pine bark, while it might be great if you're Isley Nursery and you're growing trees that are just going to be
fast to market.
Yeah, fast to market, going to be in a container for 10 years and then be planted in someone's yard.
Yeah.
Totally different story than in a bonsai pot where we want something to live for more than 10 years.
And that bark soil is really cheap to ship versus anything else, versus a legitimate loam.
It's cheap to ship. They still change it a lot with different nutrients. They use non-composted bark versus composted because they know it's cheaper just to add the nutrients that non-composted bark might be lacking. But yeah, again, they have totally different goals than we do in bonsai, and for bonsai we just need no organic components in the soil. That's why we fertilize.
Kind of a similar question actually, because I did mention mulch. Leaf litter, that's also not really a good idea to leave on the soil, like as an idea to get fertilizer back into the tree. Because I know that forest scientists sometimes, when they measure how much nitrogen got into a tree, they actually go in fall. They go look at the leaf litter around that tree. Then they measure what's in those leaves. Yeah. And they can see that there is some leftover nutrients in the leaves that are dropped to the ground. Yeah. But we don't want to be leaching that into the pot as a
It's not that it's a bad thing, it's just it's totally not necessary if we're fertilizing correctly.
Right.
So it's leaf mulch is actually some of the best mulch you can get. Definitely don't put it in your compost bin and just throw it away to whoever collects that.
So it is nutritious, but it's not.
Nutritious.
It's not
Just
very functional.
use
in
it for
our,
your garden beds, not
Right.
for your bonsai.
Right. It's just not for our discipline.
Yeah, not for our discipline. That's right.
Okay.
It's great for just about everything else, but not for bonsai pots.
Okay. Next.
Our last one on the list is a little bit of a interesting
take.
one.
Yeah.
This one I think is more climate oriented than just about everything else on our list. Number 1 through 6 on our list that we talked about, pretty much works in all different climates.
This is the one that is going to get us like nasty comments, not just on YouTube, but probably elsewhere. There'll be someone starting a thread somewhere on a forum about this.
Something that I just really don't like as a bonsai teacher and someone who's trying to make people's trees better is solid bonsai fertilizer. Pelletized fertilizer, any fertilizer that's not liquid form. I have a few things, so let me defend my position. Number one, if you're using solid fertilizer, a lot easier for a squirrel or a bird or your dog or something to knock it off the pot and have that fertilizer source just go away without us really being able to catch it.
Kind of turns into a pile of poop and starts to inhibit drainage too. I mean,
that's reason number 2 is that it will clog the top layer of our bonsai and it causes us to repot our trees more frequently than they need to, because the bottom layer might not need a repot, but just because that top 1/4 inch is all clogged up from broken down fertilizer, it makes people repot more frequently, which isn't necessarily a good thing.
What's that practice of cleaning the soil called again? Soji? Or
Soji is where we
soji?
clean that top,
So you're like
1/4 inch.
building up all this soji debt. That you have to like pay off in the middle of the summer when everything stops draining, which I hate the look of it.
Yeah. The third one is mostly because of where I live and a lot of my clients live is here in Portland, Oregon. It's kind of a cloudy, rainy day for our viewers watching us on YouTube.
Pretty humid today. Yeah.
It's humid today, but for the majority of our growing season, it's dry and sunny. And during really dry, low humidity type weather, solid fertilizers, those fertilizer cakes that we put on, just do not behave the same way that they do in really hot, humid climates. If you go to Japan or you go to St. Louis, Missouri, where I grew up, and you put biogold on your tree and you water in the morning and you come back 5 hours later, that biogold is still going to be stinky and wet and slimy and kind of really...
That's what you want though, right?
Yeah, that's what we want, microbially active. You put biogold on your tree in Oregon or in Los Angeles. Or
Denver even.
Yeah, Denver.
Yeah.
You come back, 30 minutes later, and after watering, and that biogold is shriveled up. It doesn't smell.
Yeah.
It's desiccated. There's no life there.
You have to ask yourself whether it has any influence over the material below at that point.
Yeah, I just see people who use primarily solid fertilizers in dry climates have some of the most anemic trees, some of the most kind of nutrient deprived trees.
Do you think those are under fertilization scenarios?
Yeah, they might be. They're probably using too less of it. And in fact, when you're using solid fertilizers, most people tend to use too less anyway. Like if you look at a black pine in Japan right before decandling, it has so many fertilizer pellets that you can't even see the soil.
Yeah, they cover the soil.
Totally covered, right? And versus in America, they have like 4 little pellets on there.
Yeah.
So most people aren't using enough anyway, but it's a lot of labor to go through and just, either if you're making them or buying them, just keep adding them on. And like we said, it's really clogging up the top layer of the soil. So
I've tried to defend the functionality by packing it into a tea bag and then just watering often.
That definitely helps.
Yeah, but the problem I have with that, and the reason why I've kind of gone more towards your method, which is like liquid fertilizer, is the tea bag is in just one corner of the pot. If I have very draining pots, I feel like I have this sort of radiation of fertilizer sort of down from that tea bag and nowhere else in the pot. Maybe this is like a little neurotic, but I just feel like I'm over concentrating fertilizer out of this one tea bag, out of this one deposit zone, and then maybe just like missing, especially in the surface roots nearby, right?
Yeah.
A surface root on the very opposite end of the pot might not be getting anything.
Yeah, when there were several. I really like BioGold. That's a product that I really like, and if I lived in a different climate, I might consider using it. When I did use it a lot in the past, I wouldn't rather do like a big pile in a bag. I would like spread out the pellets kind of equally over the pot, so like 1 pellet 2 inches, 1 pellet 2 inches, 1 pellet 2 inches. I think if you're using solid fertilizer, that's a better approach, so you get even better widespread distribution.
Seems to be how they do it in Japan too. They kind of do a radial pattern around.
Yeah, rather than just kind of 2 tea bags on either end. But ever since I switched to liquid, not just here in a dry climate, but even my clients who are in really humid climates, I just see I see better results with liquid.
So like humidity or not, with liquid, you're just covering the entire thing.
Yeah, we're not clogging up the top of the pot. We know it's getting in there because when you water in the pot, a squirrel or raccoon or a dog isn't going to flick it off, or a bird.
Yeah.
And there's just a nice peace of mind knowing that when that tree starts to dry out, it's pulling everything that you just put into the pot up into the tree. Now, let's close out this podcast by talking about how we fertilize here.
Let's do it.
I have a whole video about this if you want to see our specific kind of setup with images on the dosatron and whatnot. But basically, I have a fertilizer injection system called a dosatron, which is a little expensive to get one, but it's very precise, and that's why it's expensive. When you change the pressure, unlike a siphon, where if you just get a $20 siphon from the hardware store, you change the pressure halfway, and you cut down the sucking power of the siphon halfway. This is incredibly precise. You change the pressure; it's the same every time. It doesn't break. It's just a really, you get what you paid for it.
If you're serious, a dosatron is the way to go.
If you're serious, a dosatron is the way to go. I know Todd Schlafer has one, Michael Hegedorn has one, Jonas Dupuy has one. A lot of top-level bonsai gardens are shifting to this, and it's not a bonsai product. It is used in the agricultural industry because it is one of the best things.
Yeah, we know a field grower that's using it on, I don't know, like 30,000 square foot bonsai operation.
Yeah, it is a great product, and so I use that dosatron, and I am injecting a very small amount of Miracle-Gro into my trees every single time I water. They're getting somewhere between 1/10 and 1/20th strength. And then I kind of just read the garden as a whole to see if I need to adjust up or down. But I kind of look at the overall health of things, and if I feel like things aren't getting enough, I add a little bit more. If I feel like they are, I take it back down.
And that's for the micro-dosed baseline that the entire garden gets.
The entire garden gets
a
baseline nutrition out of the hose. Again, because none of these pots in the garden have any organic component to provide any nutrition, these trees need a baseline of that. So every single thing through the hose, every day of the growing season, so once they wake up post repotting and all the way up until around Thanksgiving when all the leaves fall off, they're getting low dose fertilizer every single time. And then things that need more, I'll go around and give more fertilizer to. Maybe once a week we'll go around, and all the flowering plants, all the weak plants, all the trees that have a big sacrifice that I'm trying to make the trunk bigger.
So in those situations, you've already watered with the standard baseline
They've
microdose.
gotten their baseline out of the dosatron.
Then you're coming in with another watering can.
That's
and
right.
adding
adding
doses.
a full, those get full strength fish emulsion, once a week, or full strength grow big once a week.
And I've been here when we've filled one of these giant urns with water.
Yep.
Added an appropriate amount.
And we go around and find those target trees.
Then we just dunk our watering cans and go, and you point at trees, and I add wherever we need it. That's a nice strategy.
Yeah, and we do that once a week. Rather than just do it can by can, we just fill up a big urn, or if you have a 5-gallon bucket, that's even a way to save yourself a little work. But we could even just go to the dosatron and switch that, although I don't like leaving my nice kind of calculated number.
It would be nice to have like a 2-lane where you could just quickly shift it over to the other one with a valve and then shift it back. I've thought about setting that up with my cheapo dosatron that I have at home, that Easy Flow, which is kind of like a $80 to $100 sort of dosatron-ish type thing. Yeah, where if I had two of those side by side and I could just, switch a valve somewhere, I
Yeah.
could have like ultra high dose. But even on that, there is actually a little dial where you can go into fast mode and slow mode.
Yeah.
And fast mode does give you like a much wider open valve to
Yeah,
get
yeah.
that higher dose. So there's a lot of strategies that you could use to do that, I think.
Yeah, but I've been using liquid fertilizers for the last 10 years, and they've always just, I've seen both on my trees here and on all of my client and student trees, it just makes a huge difference in the health. So,
Yeah.
and especially microdosing, rather than, I used to just only do one heavy dose once a week on
Yep.
the trees. But once I started spreading that heavy dose out to every single watering,
The trees are always growing, right? They're always demanding
they're
water.
always demanding it. So
Yeah.
rather than just give them one big hit and then starve them in between, having that constant access to
Yeah.
just low dose nutrition has really, really made a difference. And there's no way I'm going back.
It's
So,
incredibly reassuring to know that there's this galaxy of all these products being thrown at us with really, really tall claims, but the professionals who are winning shows and who are actually not bending over backwards for their trees except in attention to detail, like are doing it all with, or could do it
relatively
all
basic stuff.
with basic stuff that's mostly off the shelf. I mean, this is like Home Depot stuff.
Yeah.
Right? You can get everything.
I get everything that I need, fertilizer, insecticide, all that stuff at Home Depot.
Yeah, or if you're in another country, just whatever your local garden center
Yeah,
is. Yeah, your
that's right.
biggest garden center, not specialty stuff.
Yeah,
even. Yeah.
So yeah, just be cautious. There's a lot of these industries are going to throw a lot of stuff on the bottles, try and make you spend money with some outrageous claims. And all of this is just our opinions, what we see, and we're just sharing with you what we do here. But if you're doing something at home that works and you believe it to work, keep doing it, because we want you to have success in your bonsai practices. But if you have any questions about what we covered today, the next episode we are doing a Q&A, so drop those questions in the comment section. We will answer them on our next episode. They definitely fertilizer focus. We're happy to talk about those, or just any questions that you might have about deciduous bonsai as a whole. You've been watching the Deciduous Bonsai podcast. I'm Andy Robson.
I'm Maciek.
And we will see you next episode.